Well, good afternoon. As I said, my name is Berta, and I hope you like this talk. I try to do it a little bit fun because it's the last day on the afternoon, and you probably heard a lot of really good information, and your brain might be a bit tired. So hopefully you like this one. So the first thing before we start is a couple of disclaimers. The first one is I hate this label junior developers, senior developers, mid-level developers, intermediate developers, mid-senior, mid-junior. I think they're bullshit. I'm also probably gonna swear. I'm sorry, but I think they're bullshit. I don't think they don't work. I don't think we should be using them. But for the purpose of this talk, they they are look what they I'm gonna be using them because it's how we talk and it is how we use them. But I don't think anyone should call themselves a junior developer or a senior developer. So that's the first disclaimer. The second one is experience has value. Meaning, at no point in this absolute talk am I ever saying that experience doesn't have value or senior developers are not valuable to the team. They obviously are. If you ever met a recruiter on LinkedIn, you know they are. It's the only thing people look for. This talk is just not for them. But at any point, am I saying that experience doesn't have value? The reason why I'm giving this talk and why it's not about senior developers, it's because based on my experience and what happened to me. So I'm going to shortly explain a little bit because it gives you context of how bad it can go in the industry. So I didn't start computer science right after high school. I actually started as a photographer. And I was working as a professional photographer in fashion in New York for around four years. And during that time, I started playing with code to do my own portfolio because if not, developers are really expensive. So I started playing and I started learning. And my first language was actually, besides HTML and CSS, was JavaScript, which is probably the reason why I still hate it to the day, because it reminds me of being very frustrated about it, because most of my code was basically copy-paste. I call them Frankensteins. It was just copy-paste code from other places, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. But I had no basis or foundation of what a variable was, or a string, or a function, or a class. Like, I hadn't gone to any classes. So around 2 years' time, I had been doing this, and I started actually doing websites and portfolio for other people, probably because I was cheaper than real developers. And there was a moment that I realized that I enjoyed doing that more and playing around with code than photography. So I decided to switch. And in my family, if you do something, you do it right. So I went back to school. And I actually took a CS degree in a computer class. And mostly this was me during the 4 years in CS school. I mean, it did give me some foundations, but honestly, it was kind of an excuse to get a visa to stay in the States. I mostly it taught me a little bit, but I still kept fucking up with a lot of code, and I still kept building things because New York is expensive and I had to pay the bills. And websites and WordPress and templates that you can do in a weekend and then sell over and over made me a bunch of money. And then I could stay in New York. So I kept doing it. And then I graduated and I got my first job as an actual mobile developer. And I like mobile because it was like I was getting really bored of workplace templates, and it was really fun. And I was in an agency, and I was doing Android and Unity and Swift, and every problem was completely different and completely new, and I loved it. But I don't know if you look at the news, but around 2016, something got elected in the US presidency, and visas were kind of a difficult thing. So they had to renew mine, and at that moment, basically the company was like, I don't think we can afford to. So after being in New York for 6 years, I went back home. And before getting to know this company, I interviewed, but I hadn't really went into the job market. They found me through my school and through people that I knew through local meetups in New York, right? So when I went back to Barcelona, I didn't know anyone about code. I barely had any technical work for a company experience. I have only been technically working for a year, if you don't count all the freelance stuff that I did for 4 years while I was fucking up a lot. And I went back to Barcelona, didn't have any contacts, didn't know anyone about code, and I started trying to find a job. And that's when I realized that I was a junior developer. At that time, I just didn't even know what the label was. I wasn't really like into the tech. I had always been in like a weird moment between tech and design. And it was the first time that I got into the real job industry. And I realized that I was a junior developer, which I thought was kind of fair because I still kind of fucked up a lot and I still didn't know a lot of things about abstraction and like high level and multi-threading and like memory management, all of this. But at the same time, I had built apps. There are apps still in the App Store in both iOS and Google that have my code from 2015 when I was an intern, technically. So I could do this. I knew I could do this, right? So I got to Barcelona, like full on, I'm going to be a developer, I'm going to find a great company, and I'm going to join the job market. And obviously, that happened right away. No, it didn't. Obviously, that was sarcasm. That's a joke. It did not. It went terrible. It went absolutely terrible. This is an actual rejection from a company. They didn't say that I couldn't develop. They said I had no value to offer a team as a person. If you ever hire or are hiring anyone, never say that to anyone. I thought it didn't need to be said, but apparently it does. So I went through, I think, like 3 months of constant rejections, one after the other and after the other. And this obviously was the worst, so it deserved its own slide. But most of them, it was this. Our team cannot afford to hire a junior developer right now, which is the suckiest way to reject anyone, because what am I going to say about that? You're wrong. I've seen your finances. I hacked your database, and I've seen that you can actually afford to pay me. Like, there's nothing you can say. You just sit there and go like, okay, so I guess I'll stop being a junior. But like, what is that? How do I stop being a junior if I don't get a job? Like, what is a junior really? So I did what I do best every time I have a problem. I Googled it. And through a bunch of Googling and meeting a bunch of people in the community, I got off my ass and started going to the meetups in Barcelona. And talking to a bunch of people, I realized that they were wrong and I wasn't. And through the process, I got an actual job. And 3 months of being a developer on the job, I got to a point where I realized how much full of bullshit they were by saying our team cannot afford to hire a junior developer. Because if you are a developer or if you know anyone, you can ask them. Developing like actual code is like a third, and that's giving it a lot of pressure of what we do. Most of our days, besides the endless meetings and stand-ups, we do other things. We are part of a team. We talk to people. We have to keep learning. So being a developer is way more than just sitting next to a computer and churning code. We aren't machines. We're people. And we do a lot of things that have to do related with people and code, but also everything else. And it was kind of bullshit that all these companies had basically just looked at me and saw my ability to do code, but nothing else. Through everything that I had been doing for the past 6 years, take into account that when I'm talking about what this happens, at that point, I was 27 years old. I had been working since I was 18. I had been managing people since I was 21, and I was assistant photographer of a big photographer in New York. I had been managing entire photo shoots. That means talking to a stylist, to magazines, to people who made more money than I would probably ever make, and ordering them to give me things on time. So all of this, the only thing of all these three things that actually makes a developer, the only thing that was low was the actual code. Everything else, I had job experience. I had experience. But they were only looking at code. But we do more than code. And it made no sense because it just doesn't make sense. And that should change. So that's the point I realized that I didn't want to stop being a junior developer. I'm sort of still am. I've been doing this for like 2.5 years. I had to be a good developer, which is very different to being a junior developer. So I went into, okay, so how do I go from being a junior developer, which I hate that word, to being a good developer? And I did the same thing that I did before. I Googled it. And I found this really good article about this guy who posted this tweet asking a bunch of people. He's in the States, and he has a bunch of people from big companies like Amazon and Microsoft about what makes a good developer. And I really like this chart because if you look at it, the only two things on both sides that could be code related, as in your ability to print out as much code as possible in front of a screen, could be skilled and incompetent. On both sides, it's 1 out of 5. I put it on my own chart, it was 1 out of 3, which is 33%. But this is 1 out of 5. So we're still keeping evaluating people and deciding if they deserve a job and a place in our team for something that it's 1 out of 5. And a skilled is so big. Like, it could also mean not only being able to code, but being able to problem solve, being able to find it on Google. I mean, there are a lot of things right now that if a Stack Overflow and all my access to the internet will fall down for 5 hours, I might be lost. I might become incompetent for 5 hours until internet comes back up. Because one of the things I love about mobile is that most of the problems that I find, I haven't found them again. It's not like when I was doing WordPress templates that was basically copy-pasting my own code and changing the colors and doing different things. It's a thing that I love. It's different problems every day that I need to solve. And I use the internet to do so. And I use my team. And I use a shit ton of people that I know through communities and Slack. I don't work alone. So I could still be called incompetent sometimes. My skill levels could still be low, depending on who you ask. But everything else, problem solving, being a leader, I don't know. But the passion, that's for sure. I have that. Mentor, teacher, I mean, depends on who comes and depends on on what we're talking. But it's still like 1 of 5. And we really need to stop just evaluating people on how they're junior and their ability to code. And if you are a junior developer right now and you're a bit lost and you think that your coding skills might be impeding you from going into tech, I'll actually highly recommend that you focus on the other skills over code. Like years of code, you cannot really make the time go faster. If you have 1 year doing code, you have 1 year. If you have 2 years, you have 2 years. That's how time passes. There's nothing you can do about it. But you could focus that by the time you hit the 3-year mark, which is what people seem to like, you at least have everything else. You at least are on a very good track to be a very good developer over a senior developer. So another thing that I found while I was Googling, I was Googling all of this, so the junior developer tag was not attached to me anymore because I hated it and because it reduced the opportunities that I had in the industry. One of the things that I found were this. They don't understand high-level concepts. They don't take into account performance and maintainability. They write code without understanding, and they cost time. And that one has quotation marks specifically because it's the one that I'm most angry about. And honestly, I think it's bullshit. So if you're ever hiring someone and this is the things that you're thinking because they have very little experience, you are looking at this in a very pessimistic way. They don't understand high-level concepts. That it might be true. It depends on the person and it depends on the concepts. But that's very easy to understand. You just teach them. You just let them understand them. They don't understand performance or maintainability. Again, depends on the person, but also show them what happens when code goes back. Show them the worst tech debt on your app. Literally, like the worst thing you can think of. Show it to them and tell them, we got here through this. I can promise you that developer is going to be scared shitless for the rest of his life of that code. They write code without properly understanding. That especially affects when you're doing frameworks. So for iOS, it's usually RX Swift or any other framework that we use a lot. For Android, I think it's RX Java or RX Kotlin. A lot of things that I found while I was interviewing, a lot of people have told me later, is that, well, they use RX, and I didn't fully understand the deep-level concepts of RX. I just knew how to use it. And I didn't answer that during the interview, but me internally was like, so? I know how to use it, right? So? Like, yeah, I know I have 2 years and have experience. Yes, I know I don't understand fully deep, but I don't work in a vacuum. I have other people. If I'm gonna fuck up, I am gonna have someone that helps me on the team, which has happened before. Doing RX, I once on a PR almost created 25 memory cycles. It didn't get merged, obviously, because I don't code alone and because I have an amazing team behind me. And they told me, and now I'm never making that mistake again. And the whole cost time is probably one of my favorite ones because that's the one that is said a lot, and it's still said a lot in the Silicon Valley, and specifically said a lot in Barcelona. We cannot afford our senior developers to waste time on juniors. And well, that's assume that you make a very big assumption here. You make the assumption that your senior developers are actually producing code 8 hours of the day. I can tell you for a fact they are not. They're absolutely not producing code 8 hours of the day. Also, how many meetings do you have these senior developers on every day? How much time is wasted on that? Because probably half of those meetings, they would much rather prefer being able to teach a junior developer than being on any of those meetings and wasting that amount of time. But meetings is never a waste of time. Yet mentoring someone who will be a productive person of your team is. And these are the bad things. And the problem is that people only focus always on the possible outcomes or bad outcomes of having a junior developer on your team, right? They never focus on the good ones, which I think by the number alone, they outnumber the big ones. Having a junior developer in your team is not having like a baby or a kitten like the last GIF that just goes like this and does nothing, and then you have to go behind and fix it. It is a human being that's been trained to do this, that actually wants to learn and is doing their best. And one of the things that they will probably bring to your team is that they will question everything. Because yeah, they have a lot of gaps, but that means they have no assumptions. Have you ever fought with another developer about which architecture to use? You don't have to fight with a junior developer about this. It's amazing what they can do and what they can find. I found that while I started, and I have this tendency to ask a lot of questions. I was also in a very good environment where I knew I was not going to get punished for asking those questions. So I questioned everything. I questioned why we were using frameworks. I questioned how the frameworks work. I questioned why we were using architecture, why something was tested or not. Hell, I questioned why variables were named one way or another. And through those questions, I realized a lot of the time the developer was like, oh, wait, hold on, give me a second. Left, asked someone else, came back and was like, no, this is wrong, and fix it. Because sometimes we just write code without realizing. Now that I've been doing this for a little bit longer, there's the typical code that I always have to write, that I write it without thinking. And they brought someone new into my team that was just came out of a bootcamp, and he questioned that and made me stop and think and look at it, and I was like, oh, yeah, no, I don't think I should be using this here. You're correct. Yeah, they shouldn't be doing this here. But he wasn't saying I was wrong. He was just asking why. And it's really important to keep questioning what we do. But a lot of the times, we keep repeating a lot of the things we do, and we forget to do it. They also test your team's knowledge. Because if they ask you, why are you using this architecture, and no one in your team can give you an answer for that, you have a problem with the architecture. Like a really big problem, especially if the answer is not good enough. And that falls together with the fourth point, which is promote communication. When you ask someone, like, why are we using this architecture? And the person goes, oh, I don't know. I think that was before my time. And then it goes to another person and goes, why are we using this architecture? And the other go, that was before my time. It starts going around until you find someone that tells you the answer. And then suddenly the entire team, who half of them didn't know why they were using this architecture, knows why are we using this architecture. And it just took one clueless kitten baby to come there and say, why am we doing this? That's unvaluable. Like, I found that to happen repeatedly. We end up always coding at the end when we know what we're doing and only doing PR reviews and not actually sharing the knowledge between us, because we assume that everyone else, since they are at our level, they know. But the moment they put someone that breaks that flow of everyone knows and we're okay, that breaks that and makes us stop and think, oh, wait, when was the last time we actually sat down and all shared everything that we know? Through Teams. And that's really important because if not, you end up like two different parts of the app that have a that use a framework differently or use naming differently, and that's how you end up with really big tech debt that you cannot take off. And they also bring new ideas, and that's tied with the free from tech bias. Most of people that just graduated or people who are juniors are just starting up, they've been basically so afraid of getting a real job, and they haven't actually spent 8 hours in front of a computer coding, that they probably know the latest frameworks, even by not only by name, but like reading reading the blogs, listening to the podcast, and just testing all the new APIs because they're students, they have time. Like, we work 8 hours doing this. At the end of the day or weekends, most of us don't want to go and do more code, which is totally understandable. So they bring a lot of new ideas and a lot of things that we had never thought about it. But they're also very free from tech bias. Every time we find a solution to a problem that it works for us, there is a moment that we think that solution is good for everything. And that is specific to tests and architecture. There's a moment that we go like, oh, this worked for my past company and the app was perfect and we always should use MVVM. And then you pass that to your next company and you don't question it because it's true for you. But junior developers don't have that bias. They've never had to find the perfect solution for everything. So for them, no solution is perfect. And having someone on your team that questions that is invaluable. So I know there's a bunch of junior developers here. They've been told there's a bunch of students. So I wanted to also give them a little bit of advice. And that's the first, biggest, and the only one that I have that is for sure. Ask everything. Even if you're not a junior anymore, even if you're a senior, even if you're a mid-level, just keep asking questions. And that doesn't mean only ask to people, like go and bother everyone on your team. When I mean ask everything, I mean Google everything. I mean go on Slack, go on Discord, ask it to yourself. I mean go into a framework and go like, or an open source project. It's like, why is this here? And go into the jump definition and actually read it and keep asking yourself why. Just keep asking questions. What I found out is that at the end of the day, you find more about what you're doing if you just keep going at it and keep studying than if you just give up. You might be a junior, but if you keep asking the right questions, you'll get the answers and eventually you'll get there. But I also wanted to give you a little bit more of an advice that this works for me. So I call them Berta tips, right? Because if they don't work for you, I'm sorry. This is what I found out that works for me and that works for the people around me. And the first one is the things that I still do to the day to keep up and to be a better developer. So keep up to date. That doesn't mean you have to read all the blogs, listen to all the podcasts. No one really has a lot of time, and we work really long hours. But try to find a way to at least keep up a little bit today. Being here is a really good example. For example, good job. You can check that one off. But yeah, it's just keep up to date little by little, learn, and be active in communities. And this is, for me, been the crucial point of how I found all of my jobs and how I was able to not have to navigate these amazing rejection letters from just applying on CV. And I don't mean only coming here and listening to me, although thank you for being here and listening to me. I meant be an active part of a community. And not everyone wants to go onto the stage. I am nervous too, and it's actually kind of daunting, but there are a lot of communities online. There's open source, there are Slacks, there's Stack Overflow. You can be an active part of the community by just helping organize meetups. You don't always have to speak, but be an active part. Give something back. Be there, not only be a spectator, but also being part of it. That will help you a lot. It will help you a lot not only feeling like you belong here, so the rejection letters will probably hurt less. They still hurt. They just hurt less. But also, it will help you meet other people that will actually tell you not only what you need to know, but how to navigate these things and how to market yourself better. Just no one has actually done this alone. So you don't have to do it either. And find a mentor. That was really important for me when I was beginning. The whole things of like threads and memory management and all of these things and React, I basically had people that were on a Saturday on a Skype calls with me, teaching me about this. And then when I met them at conferences later on, they were like, "Oh, you don't owe me a beer." I was happy to do so. And I'm still amazed and still trying to give back in a way for what they did. I wouldn't be where I was today if it wasn't for those people. And that's going to be hard because not everyone is going to say yes. We are busy people. So not everyone that you met on me on Twitter is going to be like, "Oh yeah, I have 15 hours to dedicate to you to be your mentor," right? But don't be afraid to ask. You might follow them on Twitter. Don't be afraid to answer to a post that they say that they post about if you are confused about something. Don't be afraid to DM them. They're normal people. They're going to be really happy to help you when they have the time. They might take 5 months to answer. That has none to happen. But it's fine. Just get yourself out there and try to find someone or someone's, more than one, that can help you navigate this weird world that we call the tech industry. And have fun, because this is fun. Still to the day, coding for me is fun. I like it. There are like little puzzles that you get to create and something pops up on a phone and you get people that use what you create. I think it's amazing and I love it. And if you forget that the reason why you're here is because it's fun, the rejections are going to hurt much less. You're going to stop trying to be out there. You're going to stop trying for the good companies that you want to do. And we should never forget that. And there is a specific one. Those three are specific to job postings. I hate them. The last time that someone allowed me to, my past company, to clean up job postings, I basically deleted half of the words. I was just like, cut everything off. So this one is specific to like, if you're trying to get a job posting or if you're trying to write it, please don't do that. The read between the lines means the three first things. You know, when you go to a job posting and it starts with Android and Java and Kotlin, and then there's 15 other things next to it? Yeah, forget those. Forget those. When they're writing them, they put the important things at the top. Those are the first ones that come to mind. They are the first ones that you need to know for sure, that those are the first ones that they are going to use every week. Everything else is a wish list for a magical unicorn developer that one day is going to come. It's now, 15 things, absolutely fucking perfect. And it's going to solve all of their problems. It doesn't work like that. A lot of times we look at all that 15 things and we don't apply. And that's very stupid. So only if you're writing a job posting, 3, please, 4, tops. Everything else, just put it way down. Don't put it on bullet marks. Just put it as extras. But the 4 things that your developers use every week. And if you're looking at job postings, ignore everything else. It doesn't matter. You need to know the basics. Everything else, you can learn it or they can teach you. Don't be afraid to just apply. And forget the labels. If it says senior developer, I've seen ads that say junior developer and they require 3 years of experience. I've seen ads that say senior developer and they also require 3 years of experience. And I've seen that says developer and they require 8. It makes absolutely no sense. Ignore the labels. If you find a job that you think you can do and that you like the company, go for it. And if you are still a little bit afraid that you might not meet all the requirements, if you're still a bit afraid that if a company really uses RX Kotlin a lot, for example, or you've never actually used it, then the best thing you can do is to reach out to someone that works at that company, an actual developer. Nowadays, that's really easy to do. You can probably find them on LinkedIn. You can probably find a company. And next to it, there's a list of people who work at that company. And next to those people, it says their job title. And you can go to the Android developer and message them nicely, always be nice, and message them like, hey, I was thinking of applying. Can you tell me a little bit more about the job? I've done that repeatedly, and almost all the times, the people will come back to me and say, oh yeah, this is what we usually use, this is how it goes, what else do you need to know? Bridge that gap, get as much information as you need. Maybe the job is completely different from the job posting. Possibly an HR person wrote it that has no idea what Android means. So just reach out, don't be afraid about those things. And seriously, like, no one does this alone. I wouldn't be where I was if I was alone. And I wanted to put this because it's important to me. I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be a developer if I wasn't alone. After those 3 months and 6 terrible rejections, it was July, and I was this close to say, you know what, fuck it. I will reinvent myself. I've done it before. I'm just not going to be a developer. I have 2 degrees. I can get a third or a master's or something. It seemed like this unbreakable glass that I couldn't get to, that I would never get the first job, so I will never become a developer. But I got lucky. And I got lucky, meaning I got a bunch of privileges. Someone that had reached out way before messaged me back on Twitter and started being my mentor. It took those 5 months, but he got there. I started going to the communities. I actually started building my own. And in a little bit, month by month, I had more people that were like, oh, actually, my company is hiring. Oh, let me help you with this. Or let me help you with this part of knowledge that you're missing. And I stopped feeling that much alone. And I had the ability to learn. And I don't mean I had a brain and internet access. I mean, not everyone has the ability to basically spend a month living at their parents while they're still trying to look for a job, and meanwhile doing as much code as they can. So I didn't do this alone. No one that you probably follow on Twitter or like that you know of that they're amazing did this alone, and you shouldn't have to either. Reach out. There are communities. There's a community right here. Don't try to do this alone. Try to be there and be present and let other people help you. And you will probably also get to be in the industry. And it's really fun once you get the actual work. The job interviews are not the work. And it's much, much fun to do that. So a little bit of a resume is try to be a good developer over an experienced one. It takes a lot more than just churning out code for 3 years to be a good developer. Focus on soft skills. They're important. If you already have them, add them on your CV. Make sure that when you're interviewing, that the company knows that. Only because they put the label of you that you're junior doesn't mean you're useless. You can do it. Coding is not really that difficult. You can do it. And you should never let anyone, any company, or any person tell you otherwise. And growing is better than hiring. That's not only for companies, but also for yourself. Even if you switch jobs and from one job to another, suddenly you get the label attached that you're a senior developer, it doesn't really mean anything. You haven't changed from one day to another just because they attach a label to your LinkedIn. So always improve yourself. Always try to be a good developer over a senior one. And always try to grow. And ask everything and have fun.